We can now take a look at how we record an information resource. So that's a satellite image or a journal or a book in the database, and how we relate it to a specific archaeological site or another record within the database. The example we're going to use here is a journal article, and the first thing to do with any information resource you're recording is to double check that it's not already in the database. So if we open up the database and go to the search page, we can use a piece of information we know about this journal article, so we know it's by White, for example, and type this in the search box. We then just have to double check that it doesn't appear there, which it doesn't. Once we've done that, we can go to the resource manager, which is on the top of the database, and select an information resource from the drop-down list that appears. This creates a brand new resource that we're now going to fill in. The first information box that we fill in is the resource type, and here we can record the type of information resource we're dealing with. Have a scroll through, and as you'll see, the terms are divided up under headings, so they're easy to find. In this case, we can select journal article. We can then select the format that we're using. Is it a KMZ or something from Google Earth? Is it a GeoTIFF? Or in this case, is it a digital document? So something like a digital PDF that we've looked at. After we've added those two terms, we can save edits and move on to adding a bit more information. Depending on what type of resource you're entering, you'll fill in different tabs, but in this one we're going to look at the Bibliography tab, where we fill in information about a book or a journal article. This is very similar to information that you'd include in an EndNote or a bibliographic library, and we simply want to include information about the kind of author and the date here. So let's start with the author box. Here, freehand, we type in the author surname, a comma, and then their first name as an initial. So here we have White D. We then enter the date of publication in using the calendar box. We can do this by typing the date in, and if we don't know the year and month, we simply select the first of the year of publication. So in this case, the 1st of the 1st, 1981. We can then press Add. We then go on to add a title. This again is free text, so be careful when you're entering this in and make sure you copy the title of the article of the book as it is on that volume or in that journal article. After making sure we've typed it correctly and double checking it a couple of times, we can then, once we're happy with the title, press Add, and this information will appear below under this resource has this title. We can then start to move on to have a look at a few of the other options that we can fill in data for. Editor won't be relevant for a journal article, but the source will, for example, and here we can put in the journal title. So we again type this into the box because it's a free text box, making sure that we're getting it correct by comparing against the source that we're actually using. So here we're entering American Journal of Archaeology. In some cases you might have information about place or publisher, but for journal articles the important things to include are the volume number, and that's often found on the front of the journal or the side, the spine, in this case volume 85, and also sometimes these journals have an issue or edition number, so number 1 in this case. Finally, often for edited books with chapters or journal articles, we'll want to add the pages where that article is found within that overall journal. Once you've added in all the information that you can get from the journal article, go back and check and then press Save Edits. The final thing we need to do now is relate this information resource that we've created, so this journal article, to the archaeological site that it refers to. So for this we need to go to the Related Resources tab, which is found on the left-hand side of the database list. Once there, if we click on Find Relationships, we can then use the Attribute filter to search for the specific site we want to relate this information resource to. In this case, we actually already know the Amina number, for this site. And in many cases, you'll already know the yemkenنا number because you've been working on records and have noted this down. So we type in the yemkenنا ID, and then we can select it from the drop-down list. We can check it's the right one because it will have a name under it. It's a sanctuary, so it is the right record. And we can then add a relationship. Now remember, the relationship type in this case is going to be a heritage resource to information resource relationship. So the sanctuary is referred to by the journal article. We can add a relationship and then save those edits. We now have two records, an archaeological record for the sanctuary and an information resource record for the journal article, and both of those are related to one another, as you can see here from the image. We can always go back and check that this has worked correctly by again going to the search page and entering in what we entered in at the beginning, White as a surname. Now, because we've created that record, it will appear, and we can double check that that information resource is entered in correctly.